Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode is designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. Why do we only hear about men's sexuality when it's become a problem? Why do we hear so much about the sex lives of Donald Trump, Tiger Woods, and all the fuckboys of the world, yet we hear so little about the sex lives of men who are genuinely doing it well? We're all fumbling around trying to figure out our sexual selves, so naturally, we look to others to help us find our way. So we start to take cues from those that we deem, quote, sexually successful. But all too often, those are the players, the pickup artists, and the porn stars of the world. Why? Most times it's because their sexuality is much more available than, let's say, the average, genuinely good guy doing the thing that maybe we would want to emulate. So think about the implications of that for a minute. Following the pickup artists, the porn stars, the players of the world, that's dangerous, guys. That's unacceptable. So I'm here to play a part in tearing down that old model of who we take cues from and that old model of we can only hear about a man's sexuality when it's become a problem. So I'm stepping forward to help fill this void of healthy masculine sexual role models. My sexuality was a problem for many years of my life because I had no role model to learn from or to talk to. So I bottomed out and I ended up in Sex Addicts Anonymous for 4 years as a part of an intensive process to clean my shit up. So now my sexuality is one of the greatest gifts and most powerful forces in my life. And I know that same potential exists for you to have that sexual life force be one of the most potent, clean, powerful, loving forces, exciting forces of your life. We just got to make space for that possibility. We need to have better conversations around healthy sexuality. We need to talk about men's sexuality when it's working, not just when it's not. So I want to share a story with you about something that happened recently and a pretty cool opportunity where I had the chance to serve as a healthy, masculine sexual role model for a younger guy in his early 20s. He's 24, I'm 42. That's 18 years of difference. That's a full adult-sized human being difference between, our two lives. And the conversation unfolded so naturally and organically while he was interviewing me for his podcast, the Curious with Jake podcast. I'm going to link that episode, that interview in the show notes because it was a really fire conversation between two men at different stages of our lives. And Jake is a really impressive dude. I had a chance to meet this guy 2 years ago as he was part of the team that helped me to find and land my TEDx talk. And we've stayed in touch ever since. And as he was asking me questions on his podcast, he started to broach the topic of sexuality because I'm so open about talking about all this shit, right? On this show, it's like basically nothing's taboo here. I've lived too much taboo. I've lived too much secrecy in my life. And this podcast has become like a major form of healing, being able to talk so openly and for you all to receive me so with such open arms. And I know it's obviously beneficial for you as well. You keep letting me know that. So thank you. And Jake was really courageous, especially for a 24-year-old man, to share the story that he did with me, which was he found himself in a sexual situation very recently with a woman, and it was their first time kind of going this far. I think they were having sex, and he shot his load way earlier than he wanted to. And he was embarrassed and he was ashamed. So this allowed us to have like a really thoughtful conversation about a few things. The first thing he asked me was, dude, how do I just last longer? He didn't want to deal with like the shame or the like that first. We got to that, but the first real question, and I remember this, like wanting to know the answer to this too, how do you last longer? And so I was like, we need to kind of turn back the clock here and start to recognize, like, how have we been practicing, right? How do we practice so that when we play, like when it's game day, like what are the habits that we formed? And I shared with him, I was like, I've been talking a lot about my sexuality recently on Instagram, and I did this post where the caption was, I masturbated thousands of times before coming into contact with another human being. I did the math on this, guys. Like, I was 13 when I started masturbating. I masturbated 2 to 5 times a day, every single day. And it was 18 years of age when I finally made contact with another girl that I was dating, right? So you're talking about 5 fucking years. Let's say 3 times a day on average for those 5 years. That's about 5,000 times where I jerked off, like by myself before another human being was involved. And I did so in a household, right, where sexuality clearly like wasn't something that was welcomed or discussed or talked about. So I'm sure you can relate to the fact of I wanted to be quiet and I wanted to be efficient and quick, right? A lot of guys build reps upon reps upon reps of quiet, silent, non-expressive, very quick, just get from point A to point B, like get that payoff and then go about your business, like clean up, go about your business, right? If you practice 5,000 times that way, then when a human being now comes into your orbit, you're probably oriented around your own selfish needs. You don't necessarily know how to express what it is that you want. It's not necessarily intuitive to ask the other partner what she wants. You're not necessarily looking at her pace and her speed because you're just consumed with your speed, your pace that you've built up unconsciously over all those reps. And so, of course, if like you've practiced to get from a state of non-arousal to ejaculation as quickly as possible, what do you expect to have happen when you're in a sexual situation with another person? There's no shame in that, guys. We're not taught this shit, right? So it should be no surprise when you lose your shit way too quickly or faster than you would want. So what we started talking about with Jake was like, hey man, practice as you play. Practice the way you want to play. And I said, when you jerk off, man, like how long does it take you? He's like 10 minutes. And, it's probably from the point of non-arousal to turning on porn, jerking off, getting to completion, and that's done. I'm like, great. How about the next time you jerk off, let's try to extend that to 15 minutes. Bring a clock, for God's sake. Put a clock make it 20. Practice this thing called edging, where when you start to jerk off, bring yourself to that point where you're just about to tip over. And when you feel yourself hitting those vinegar strokes, I learned this term from someone in Australia. Apparently it was like a term in the Australian army. Vinegar strokes are like that point of no return. You know what I mean? Like you could feel it coming and like you can't stop it. It's just done. Like you now are surrendered to the fact that ejaculation will happen. Bring yourself up to that point and bring enough awareness to your pleasure practice so that you don't bulldoze past that point where you can't stop it. Bring an intentional level of awareness to say, I can feel this building. I can feel it building. I'm going to feel it building. And as I approach the edge, instead of tipping over, I'm going to back away. I'm going to stop jerking off for a moment. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to circulate that energy. And then when it calms down, then I'm going to go back again. I'm going to bring it to the edge. I'm going to bring it to the edge. I'm going to bring it to the edge. And then I'm going to back down again. And you just keep doing that over and over and over. And when that happens over and over and over again, what you will start to recognize is that level of awareness will absolutely be brought into your sexual situations with another partner. And one of the things that I shared with him about heterosexual relationships, because that's my only experiences, most women are not used to being with a guy who has that level of presence and awareness and command over where he is in relation to his tipping over point, his vinegar strokes point. And when she can feel that you're slowing down your pace or you're stopping momentarily for a second, or you're actually like even asking her to slow it down because like you're heading to that point, she will have so much trust in you. She'll be so turned on by your command because it's so fucking rare that she will find you to be irresistible and will bring more of her best to you. And the longer those sessions are able to go on, not saying that every session needs to go on forever, but the more time you can spend there, not racing towards the finish line, but enjoying the journey along the way, then you'll find that sex has so many more textures, layers, depths. And that's something pretty magical to experience, especially if you've been training just to get from point A to point B as fast as humanly possible. One more thing that we ended up talking about was, and I referenced another recent post I put on Instagram. I'll link my Instagram account because you'll see some of these sexual posts that I put out there and how many women I know not all of our listeners are into women, but I have like 65% followership of women on there because they feel seen and heard by a lot of these posts. When you have a chance to read their comments about some of these topics I talk about, it's illuminating what they're looking for. And this one post I put, which was, ejaculation is not the universal signal for the end of sex. The women went ballistic for that. Because so many women have been with men where when a guy comes, sex is over, it's done. And she may be just getting warmed up, or she may be at the height of her arousal, and then it's just like, boom, she's dropped right off a cliff because the guy withdraws. He's done and like just thinks that sex is over. Not so fast, my friend. Right? You've got a tongue, you've got a mouth, you've got a finger, you got fingers, you've got a toy. Yeah, maybe she's got a toy that she wants you to use. There's an opportunity, especially in this case with Jake, where he started to feel ashamed because it was over. I was like, brother, there's no reason to feel ashamed. Like, you can roll right over and look her in the eye and smile and be like, I just got too excited. I tipped over. I didn't want it to end, but let's focus on you, right? Like, what would feel really good for you right now? Like I said, I got a mouth, I've got a tongue, I got fingers, you got a toy. Like, what can we do to keep this going for you? And so instead of having a situation like that turn out to be a place where you might be ashamed, now all of a sudden you've demonstrated an awareness and a desire to help her fulfill her sexual satisfaction and needs. And when that has happened to me in the past, my lovers have been wildly, wildly appreciative of that. I've had some circumstances where women have been like, are you hard again? Are you hard again? Are you hard again? And like, that's annoying because as I've gotten older, no, it doesn't take 60 seconds for me to regenerate anymore. And I've had to learn how to work through that and just to say, hey, listen, it's going to take me a little while to recover here. And it's probably not going to happen before the end of the session, right? So why don't we focus on me bringing you pleasure as long as that feels good to you? Or like, we could take a break. What would you prefer, right? Calmly centering, having that conversation, and then allowing the sex to continue. I mean, shit, guys, I wish I had these kinds of conversations when I was 24 years old, when I was fumbling around trying to figure out my sexual self, trying to figure out how to navigate some of these awkward situations in the bedroom. And I have a lot of envy for a guy like Jake, who's 24 years old with his own podcast, asking these kinds of questions so openly and courageously and getting this counsel 18 years before I did, And that's why we as men need to have more available sexual role models who are talking openly about this stuff. This was an edge for me 3 years ago when I started speaking about it publicly and like in in-person forums. And then a year later, we launched the podcast and spoke about it on a wider scale. And I remember like when I broke news about my sex addiction and started talking about this more openly, word made its way around my former employer of 15 years at Prudential. And, I heard some comments about, how people received that and how some people were like, wow, it's like hearing that Santa Claus wasn't real. The fact that like, maybe my persona or the way that I was perceived was all of a sudden shattered, and some of that stigma that comes along with talking about sex. I posted a picture recently on Instagram that took me 3 months of courage to post, where it was me sitting on a meditation cushion completely naked, but just with my hands covering my junk. And I'm not doing anything sexually oriented. I'm a naked man sitting on a meditation cushion, not doing anything sexual. But even that in and of itself is taboo. There's a feeling of fear around judgment for posting a picture like that. I know that in the back channels, there are people who are laughing and snickering at that. Or maybe some people thought it was like, me showing off my body for ego's sake. And it wasn't. Like, I'm here to continuously push the edges around what people have told me is allowed and not allowed to speak about. And it's the only way that men are going to be able to find genuinely healthy sexual male role models outside of the ones that are like the only things that are most available right now, or like we said before, the players, the pickup artists, and the porn stars. And the implications of it staying that way are harmful, disastrous, especially for our romantic partners and our own sexual inner well-being. So as always, I'm encouraging you guys to come over to the Facebook group, the Great Man Within Facebook group. I'm going to link it in the show notes so that we can continue conversations like these. It's been really refreshing and rewarding to watch how many more of you guys are actually taking me up on the offer, these prompts, to come to the group and start to share something that came up for you during the listening of these episodes. Because like we said a million times before, how many more fucking podcasts are you going to listen to? How many more fucking books are you going to read, on your own before you actually step out and make yourself known and talk with other guys and make yourself available to make connections to actually do the work on this stuff, not lone wolfing it, but with other guys. And we're starting to see that really pick up in the community. So head over to the Facebook group, jump in there, post this podcast, let them know what came up for you, and start to get support, or share some of your best resources on how you've dealt with this conversation around exploring your healthy sexuality. We're always looking for other tidbits of wisdom there as well. Until next time.